Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am one of two lead faculty for Modern Management of the Older Adult. That is our geriatric curriculum. We have 3 courses that we offer in our CERT MMOA that is part of our curriculum. We have our 8-week online course, Essential Foundations. Our last cohort of 2021 is starting in October. We have our 8-week online advanced concepts, which we only run a couple times a year. And that is running on October 13th. So if you've taken our 8-week online course, Essential Foundations, you are eligible to take advanced concepts. And we have our live course, which just went through a full revamp. And we have a lot of locations coming up for 2021, end of 2021, and for 2022. So super, super exciting. All right, so today, what we're gonna be talking about is chronic pain and the older adult. So there was a really nice feasibility study that was done in the Journal of Geriatric Physical Therapy in the last issue that was talking about chronic pain in older adults. And this is an interesting population to work with. One, a lot of us that are working in geriatrics probably think we are already dealing with most of our clients having some sort of central sensitization. And we have this ageism construct as well that is not letting older adults or sometimes dismissing older adults' complaints because we associate wear and tear or different types of musculoskeletal pain as something that is a normal consequence of aging. So I'm going to try and deconstruct this study and talk about, I love that it was a feasibility study because I really don't think that in the literature we have a strong grasp on the best way to try and tease this apart, especially with continuing to have more limited resources in terms of the time in rehab and all these other systems level barriers that are happening throughout Geri PT. So first off, they're talking about how at least 40% of older adults have some sort of chronic pain issue. And that's a huge number. That's probably a little bit underrepresented. And many of these individuals start to have pain in multiple pain points throughout their body. Again, if you work in geriatrics, you know that this is absolutely the case. In more private practice settings or community orthopedics, you're going to see pain as the precipitating event, bringing people into rehab. But when it comes to things like going into home health or being in acute care, oftentimes exacerbations of chronic conditions or lack of physical function is the leading cause for referral to PT. And you have to deal with the pain as an extra layer in your clinical reasoning and judgment when it comes to treatment planning. So I think that number is probably underrepresented. We also know that even in some chronic musculoskeletal injuries like arthritis, we want to think that there is some central sensitization happening. So as much as we have an underlying pathology that is going on, and I've done plenty of podcasts talking about how there's this disconcordance or disagreement between the amount of breakdown on the x-ray, but it's still a relevant piece of information, and the amount of physical pain that a person is experiencing from arthritis. So that is, we see that central sensitization is also a component of even OA, which is like this, we have this pathology, this wear and tear that is going on. So absolutely thinking that there is some central sensitization going on. So then when we think about this in terms of how it plays out in clinical practice, we see that there's a lot of kinesiophobia that can happen with older adults. Oftentimes when we're talking about really pushing the loading when it comes to older adults, one of the biggest barriers is the fact that there is so much fear of movement, or there's been all this nocebo language that has been happening for decades that are telling older adults that they shouldn't be loading, which in my opinion, is the healthcare system contributing to central sensitization versus us trying to ameliorate it? And then you have this PT coming in and we're like, all right, we're going to do some loaded sit to stands, or we're going to try and get you to lunge, or oh my goodness, we're going to try and get you on and off the floor. So things that we need to be thinking about. So then how do we start to treat it? And so this feasibility study did a really wonderful job of trying to blend some of these pain neuroscience education with exercise and movement. And so they did a series over 10 weeks of 1-hour sessions, and they kind of did this sliding scale model where they started with more passive interventions. Pain neuroscience education was the main goal of the session, and there was a tiny bit of movement at the end. So if you're thinking like 60-minute sessions, the first session, 50 minutes, was on pain neuroscience education and on addressing some of the underlying thoughts around what is going on with pain, that pain doesn't equal damage, all of these things that are a part of our toolbox. And if you haven't taken Justin Dunaway's persistent pain course, I highly recommend that you do that, because he really gives you the tools to start evaluating central sensitization and treating it very effectively in all populations. Then what they did was they gradually stepped down the P&E and stepped up the exercise. And they started taking evaluative measures or objective measures on things like the Tampa Bay Kinesiophobia scale, some of the 5 times sit to stand tests, and they started to see improvements. And so what that did was, when we talk about this in MMOA, we talk about this as intentional underdosage, right? We know that we are challenging a paradigm. We know that it is not common for older adults to be loaded. It's also not common for that healthcare interaction to involve progressive overload. Sometimes we're hoping that that is changing, but we start to talk about this as intentional underdosage. So even though we know we're not hitting that critical threshold of progressive overload or specificity potentially, we are getting individuals to move, and we are showing that there isn't going to be this flare-up of musculoskeletal pain following exercise and movement. And during that low-intensity exercise, we can start with pain neuroscience education. And then gradually we step it up. Therapeutic alliance gets built. We have an increase in the amount of time that we're spending with that client. They realize that we're there to help, and that we are trying to really get a good amount of outcome from their treatment sessions, and they gradually trust us to do a little bit more loading, and hopefully they enjoy some of the results and they feel more at ease with some of the recommendations that you're giving, and therefore you're able to get them to do a little bit more. So this kind of did that, but had a focus on like one-on-one education time, which might actually make our clients feel really at ease, because if you come in, you're like, all right, we're gonna get moving today. It might be really intimidating for a client who's been dealing with a lot of physical inactivity, has been sedentary for a lot of time, and is trying really hard to, or is feeling a little bit hopeless when it comes to some of their pain points. Okay, so because this was a feasibility study, what it was looking at was attendance and dropout rate and how much adherence there was to the protocol. And I think this is really relevant for geriatrics as well. So they did not have a super high enrollment rate. They had about a 50 to 60% enrollment rate. And some of the complaints was around time. Some people were really skeptical of the intervention. And I think that's some things that we see too. So what this makes me think about, and why I love that this was a feasibility study, is that now we need to start brainstorming, how do we open up these conversations earlier? How do we maybe get healthcare providers more on board with some of these education points earlier on? And then once we get individuals into the program, how can we keep them there? So they did some interviews and they talked about the duration of the study. It was once a week. And a lot of people, once they got in and enrolled, actually thought that a twice a week type of program was maybe going to be better than once a week. That might be a little bit of a barrier from a systems level or an reimbursement level when it comes to PT. But it allows us to kind of get a little bit more insight into how these individuals are doing, because the average age was between 76 and 84. And so that is a really close representation to a lot of our clients that we see in our, whoops, he did not like that. To a lot of our clients that we see when it comes to our PT practice. The other thing that they said is that with the people that committed to the program, which was only about 70%, again, we have to look and evaluate those dropouts, was that over 50 to 75% said that they had some improvement to a moderate level of improvement with the intervention. And so that is really, really exciting as well, right? Because we're starting to see that individuals who are adhering to these programs are getting better. And it gives us some credibility to the fact that even individuals with chronic pain who have been in this loop for potentially decades can still see this improvement with exercise as long as we tackle the pain and we don't ignore it. Because oftentimes with older adults, the big issue is that their pain is ignored as an artifact of aging. And when you hear that over and over and over again, you start to believe that that's not exactly going to ever change. And so we need to make sure that we are addressing that. So I think that that's a wonderful thing that came out of this study. The third thing is that with this feasibility study, the exercise was intentionally low intensity. We would argue with MMOA that eventually we're going to want to push that intensity to see improvements. They did see some improvement in 5 times sit to stand time. They didn't have any statistics on it because it was a feasibility study. So it's showing again that something is better than nothing. And if your client is doing it, then that is wonderful. And it gives us a little bit more of an opportunity to start working on blending these two models. And if you've heard us talk at ICE, we always talk about and not or, right? Of course, Lindsay Huey had dubbed the phrase, loading is our love language. We would definitely be biased that way with MMOA, but we have manipulation in our toolbox. We have persistent pain, education, and P&E, and we have all of these modalities. And this study just really beautifully brought together the and not or construct. And so sometimes we think that all of our MMOA stuff is really focused on exercise, and a lot of our labs and teaching are, but we absolutely recognize that there is this component that we really need to be tackling, which is that kinesiophobia, that central sensitization, that chronic pain that is going to really, really influence our outcomes. And this study did a really great job of starting to blend the two in a very systematic way and give us some really promising outcomes. So before this baby wants to get fed, the last thing we're going to talk about is just like some of the summaries. So we know that many of our clients with multiple comorbidities are coming in with also a lot of pain points, whether that be degenerative in nature or if that is some of the chronic in nature, or if that is some central sensitization or a consequence of deconditioning and physical inactivity. That is going to all exist. We need to make sure that we're addressing it. We have a lot of healthcare providers who dismiss it because of age, and we're starting to see some of these and not or studies that are blending pain neuroscience education, potentially with a little bit of intentional underdosage, and then sliding that scale once that base has been built around understanding where pain come from and how these constructs of pain are represented within our brain and how these outputs exist. And then we can really start to push the envelope when it comes to our exercise prescription and get some of that progressive overload there to make sure we're getting some of those functional outcomes. So if you're interested in the DOI, again, it was a feasibility study, so there was a lot of discussion and interview. But I really like that because it gave us insight into how our clients are doing and how the program is perceived. And it wasn't just looking at the statistically significant results. So there was qualitative and quantitative pieces to the study, and feasibility studies are really important to really start opening up the boxes of what we can do and going from there. So if you're interested, let me know. I'll post the DOI below. Otherwise, if you are not on our MMOA digest, that is a bi-monthly to every 2 weeks research email that is very focused in geriatrics. Our team is scouring, like I was, with the Journal of Geriatric Physical Therapy for ideal studies that are coming out or new things that are pushing our envelopes or challenging our biases, and we are bringing them to your inbox every 2 weeks. So that goes out next week. If you're not on that email list, go to resources on ptionice.com and you can sign up. All right, this little boy needs to get fed, so I am hopping off of here. I hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday, and we will talk soon. Bye.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.